Welcome back. I'm Raoul Contreras, and we have a guest today, Ruben Navarette, who is a writer for the Washington Post Writers Group, formerly with the San Diego Union, the Arizona Republic, the Dallas Morning News. Ruben has been around for a while, and he has observed the politics of Hispanic America and the United States of America, and has some distinct views on it. So let's set it up with this. There are articles in the Wall Street Journal, National Review, and other places that are stating that the Republican Party doesn't have to change at all to appeal to more Hispanic voters. Ruben has his view, and I have mine. Mine is very simple. The Mexican American community in the United States is only 5% rural. So if the National Review or Wall Street Journal says that the Republicans are making huge strides in the rural areas of America that are inhabited by Hispanics, they may be right, but does it matter? If 95% of the Hispanic community and the Mexican American community is urban, city boys, city girls, then what difference does it make if Starr County, Texas, with 60,000 people and only 44,000 possible voters, of which only half voted, increased their vote for Donald Trump over 2016 in 2020? Does it really matter? Because Biden still carried the county, although Trump carried the state, but he carried it in other parts of the state, not in the Rio Grande Valley. So let's introduce Ruben Navarette from the Washington Post Writers Group, and let's get his views on this subject. Ruben, good morning and welcome to you.
Raoul, great to be back with you. Thank you. Happy New Year.
You too. Well, what do you think about what I just said?
Take, well, I'll tell you this. You put your finger on one thing, which is that we're not a monolith. The Latino community, let's just do a little background here. 62 million Latinos in the country, about 18% of the population. In short order, in about 20 years, will be a quarter of the population. But we are, and while a very important population of people, and concentrated in certain battleground states like Florida and Texas, increasingly Arizona, states that are very close and on the margins. We are an important population, but it's hard to put us in one basket because we are divided by young and old, by education level, by class level, by gender, by immigrant status versus native born, and the very important distinction that you brought up, which is rural versus urban. I live in an urban center now. I was raised in a rural center. I understand it's a very good point, but you centered in on rural and urban, which is very legitimate. You could well have picked something else. You could have picked class, education, the fact that we come from different countries of origin. 62% about of the Latino community is Mexican or Mexican American. Smaller percentages, as you know, are Dominican, Cuban, Puerto Rican, Colombian, Venezuelan. They all together add up to about a third of the leftover population. So it's very hard, I think, for demographers and political consultants and folks on Madison Avenue, frankly, to sell us stuff because we are a very varied and diverse community. So that point is well taken. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, yeah, that is extremely important. Yes, religion, local politics. Yeah. Local politics can have them voting for Republicans at the local level, like in California, and like they do all over Southern California. There's 100 and some odd elected Mexican American officials in Southern California, maybe more. And yet, on a statewide basis, they don't fool around. They voted for Gavin Newsom by $1.5 million margin or something like that? Yeah, so they are very particular ticket splitters. That's been my experience in almost 60 years.
Mine as well. And here's another point to bear in mind here. I have seen a lot. You have seen a lot. We've been doing this for 30, almost 40 years in some cases, right? And we've seen people get it right. Ronald Reagan got it right in 1984. He got 40% of the Latino vote. He believed that Latinos had to be made into Republicans. We already are Republicans. We just don't know it, as he would say. He made a concerted effort to go after that population of people. 20 years later, in 2004, George W. Bush got 44% of the Hispanic vote. We've seen people like Richard Riordan, Rudy Giuliani at the local level, mayor's level. We've seen people like Arnold Schwarzenegger do well. We've seen former governors like Governor Jane Hall in Arizona when I lived there. She got 40% of the Latino vote. What we have shown time and again is that while we are registered Democrats, we will vote for moderate Republicans. And I think what troubles me a great deal about what you read and what's out there in the National Review is it goes against human nature. And somehow I can attract people by not changing. If I just stay the way I am, if the Republican Party just stays the way it is on immigration, which is oftentimes boneheaded, nativist, racist in many cases, that Latinos will just get over it and they'll come to you and you don't have to change. It doesn't work that way. We'd all like to believe that somehow, you know, I like that girl, I like that boy. If I just stay who I am and I don't make any overture toward them, they'll come to me. They'll find their way to me. It's a lazy approach, but human nature says otherwise.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, going back to my early years, I would be willing to bet that in 1952, Dwight Eisenhower received a majority of the what was then, nobody recognized the Hispanic vote.
Right.
Or that word didn't even exist, or the Mexican-American vote. That vote didn't exist. It was called the Spanish-speaking.
Right.
And there were no records kept. Nobody started studying our vote until 1968. But my feeling is, in 1952, I was only 11 years old, but I wore an I Like Ike button to school every day, and got turned in by a teacher because I wouldn't take it off, and I refused, but I won the argument. And I stood outside of school as the buses pulled up every morning with the sign, I Like Ike, vote Eisenhower 52. I was 11 years old, you know.
Yeah.
So, but I suspect that in 52 and 56 that Eisenhower did very, very well, much better than anything we've seen lately. But we don't know, because it wasn't until the late 60s that they started looking into the 60s. And Richard Nixon installed the committee of the Spanish-speaking committee in the White House. He was the first president to do so, which is interesting because he succeeded Lyndon Johnson, allegedly a big favorite of the Tex-Mex Mexicans.
There is a tape out there you can find on YouTube and elsewhere, but it's a video of Jacqueline Kennedy in 1960, in the 1960 election, after Ike, before Nixon, making a pitch to Spanish voters in Spanish.
Yeah, I remember.
As we know, Jacqueline Kennedy spoke multiple languages, and she was fluent in French and she was very good in Spanish. And if you dial it up, you'll see that in 1960 there were these Viva Kennedy clubs that popped up all over the place. John Kennedy was the first candidate that really sort of let the Latinos on fire, lifted them up and lit them on fire. And from that point on, as you said, they started keeping track. But I don't like this trend. I think it's a very dangerous trend for the Republican Party, to be blunt, to think somehow that it can continue on down its road and have its cake and eat it too. It wants to be able to cater to white people in America who are scared of Latino growth. And they hope that if they don't change and they keep demagoguing that community by racist and nativist means, that there'll be enough of us who are willing to overlook that because, hey, we agree with Republicans on the education and on the economy. Tell you what, I'll vote for you. You can stay racist. You can stay racist, and I'll support you anyway. And the response of the Republican Party is, mira que suave. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to change. They'll come to me. If you build it, they will come. And that is completely false. That's not how marketing works. George W. Bush famously was in a conversation with Lionel Sosa, the advertising guru in the Latino community, with Karl Rove, the three of them. And Sosa recalls this to me. George W. Bush says to Sosa in 2004, how much money do you need for this Hispanic initiative? And Sosa says, I need $1 million. George W. Bush turns to Karl Rove and says, give him $2 million. Okay? That's how you get 44% of the Hispanic vote. Okay? And Republicans are stupid. They just make this harder on themselves. It's as if somehow I went to Democrats and I said, ¿Sabes qué? I'm going to get you a whole bunch of new voters, evangelical Christians, because you never do well with evangelical Christians, white evangelical Christians. And then the Democrats say, that's great. And I say, here's the best part. You don't have to stop being pro-choice. You can continue favoring abortion rights, and the Christians are going to come to you anyway. And the Democratic Party says, that's great, because I get to have my cake and eat it too, right? I don't have to change, and these people are going to come to me anyway. It's illogical. It's not the way human nature works.
You know, people forget one thing, that when George W. Bush was elected in 2000, that was just 2 years after he had been reelected as governor of Texas.
Right.
And as governor, he got over 50% of the Mexican vote in Texas. Now, let's compare the votes in Texas to Florida, because Florida is a special case, and this is a national program, so let's talk about that. Florida is about, Miami County, Dade County, is about 68% Hispanic, of which most are Cuban, and some Venezuelans and Central Americans, Nicaraguans. In fact, you and I know some personally from down there, and from Nicaragua, that are living in Florida now. And the people in Florida then are a little different. The state of Florida has been fighting with the tomato growers, for example, because they import Mexican workers, and then they keep the prices down, their wages paid down, but at the same time they're competing against tomatoes that are imported from Mexico through Nogales, as a matter of fact. And that's one of the largest exports from Mexico to the U.S. And so there's this constant fight. And caught in the middle are the Mexican farm workers, legal farm workers, that are brought into Florida to work the tomato fields. So Florida is a very unique situation.
It is. It is. And here's the thing. Many years ago, let's say in 1980, if you and I were in Miami in 1980, they have an annual celebration, Calle Ocho, the Calle Ocho celebration on Calle Ocho. So Calle Ocho is the main drag there, the main street of Latino America in Florida and in Miami. Back then, you'd see one Cuban flag. You'd see Cuban flags, one kind of flag, Cuban flag. I went back in 2000 to a Calle Ocho celebration in Miami, and the 5 prominent groups of Hispanics are represented there. Colombian, Nicaraguan, Venezuelan, there's Puerto Rican, who are many Puerto Ricans in the center of Florida, around Orlando, the Orlando area in the middle of Florida, and the Cuban Americans. And so what that's done, Raoul, is it's put Florida into play. It's 1 year, it's a Democratic state, a Republican state. It's very much an up for grab place. And I think that, for instance, Ron DeSantis, who's the governor of Florida and wants to be president, he's making a hard line on immigration that could cost him with some Latino voters. So it ain't the way it used to be in Florida. You're right. Your point's well taken. It's much more complicated, not just compared to Texas, but compared to Florida in 1980. It's complicated.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. When I was back there releasing the book that I did on former Governor Charlie Crist, the county chairman of the Republicans was a Cuban. The mayor of Miami was a Cuban. All but one congressman, I think, in the metro area were Cubans, and that's changed considerably now, because a lot of Venezuelans are there, and that have moved in the past 15 years since Cesar Chavez, or whatever his name was, not Cesar Chavez, he was a boxer. The dictator and Maduro, who succeeded him. They've driven out, I have read that they've driven out over 1 million people from Venezuela that first went to Colombia and have been coming here ever since. They're good people. I've met a number of them, actually in Hawaii. They were vacationing, and I just happened to mention something, and they caught the word in Spanish, and we got to talking, and they told me that they gave me the Venezuelan story. In any event, okay, so we look at the situation politically with the Hispanic Americans, and we disagree with the premise that the Republicans have to do nothing, and that the Hispanics will just show up and vote Republican, even if nobody asks them. Are we in agreement on that?
We're in agreement, and not only that, but we're in agreement that would really, on the part of the Republicans, it would repeat a Democratic mistake. Raoul, the big story is, in fact, that Latinos are leaving the Republican Party. They're leaving the Republican Party in certain places, in certain races, because the Democratic Party took us for granted. So the one thing I hear from Hispanic Republicans is, man, I really am afraid that we're going to make the same mistake the Democrats did. And I said, what's that? And they said, the Democrats got comfortable. They didn't have to do anything. Latinos would just show up and vote Democrat. You mentioned Gavin Newsom. All you have to do is have a D after your name, and Latinos would show up and vote Democrat. Republicans would love to have that kind of luxury of being able to not do anything. And what I'm hearing from Hispanic Republicans is that's a danger. Complacency is a danger. We don't want to do the same thing Democrats did, because then they'll leave us. You see, the trick, Raul, is not can the Republican Party get the Latino vote? It can. It can't keep it. It can't preserve it. It can't maintain it. Because we will leave in the next election. We'll go somewhere else. If you treat us the way the Democrats treat us, which is basically to take us for granted. What's so difficult about showing me some respect? You want my vote? Show me some respect. I pay taxes. I work hard. Come to me and ask for my vote. The Democrat Party doesn't do that. And now the Republican Party says, "Mira, que suave. I'd love to be able to just get these votes without asking for it." It's not going to work.
One final footnote. On the recall election of Governor Newsom, which was held a few months ago, it turned out that Larry Elder won the majority Republican support. But fewer people voted for Larry Elder than voted to name a replacement for Governor Newsom. In other words, there were two things on the ballot. Number one, should Governor Newsom be recalled, yes or no? And then if it was yes, then the second part of the ballot was, well, who do you pick out of these dozens and dozens of candidates? And Larry Elder led that pack, but he received fewer votes than votes not cast. And I think Republicans should pay attention to that. Ruben Navarette of the Washington Post Writers Group, thank you for being there, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
We'll take a little break now. We'll be right back.